Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody, Mark and Steve, PBSE podcast. This is episode 242. Now, we know as we came up with this title, it's a little bit, tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic. Anyway, it says, men will just be men. Live with it. But you'll notice it says question mark and then really? All in caps.
Mm-hmm.
So it was intended to be sarcastic to make a point.
Yes.
And it really is based on, we got a submission from a partner. Our hearts we often say this, our hearts just melt. When these submissions from partners come in, we're like, oh man.
Yeah,
and I'm going to paraphrase what she wrote into us. But in essence, she was in a first marriage that I think she said lasted almost a decade.
Yes.
And it was very abusive. I mean, down to the point where she was there were some really dark and abusive things happening, and she had to get out with her kids, and she was very wise to do so.
Well, and we should mention that a big part of that was there was a lot of substance abuse and porn addiction.
Both, yep.
Both of those were
Substance
present.
abuse, porn addiction, sex addiction, a lot of really awful stuff going on from the standpoint of the addict partner that she had.
Yeah.
And so then you can only imagine everything that comes with that. But she, I'm going to say dared, had the courage, the valuing herself to dare to get into another relationship eventually. And she actually, it appears, did it right. I mean, she took her time. They sort of dated long distance for like 3 years, and she was smart and wise, and finally got into the place where they were married.
Mm-hmm.
And about a month into the marriage, here comes this bomb that nuclear bomb that literally explodes the whole situation. And she finds out that he has a pornography issue, which he did not disclose to her. And so now her whole world is literally imploding, which you can absolutely understand. And she writes into us basically with, what in the world am I going to do now? And she said it absolutely broke her. It broke her when she found this out. She was flooded with despair. Not even a month after our marriage, I was faced with the terrible realization that I had made another huge mistake, and that this was a complete stranger who had lied by omission countless times, and that I was once again in the position of being, quote, not good enough as the wife. Despite his good intention and compassion, I wrestle with these and many more tormenting thoughts daily. I feel like life was pretty much has stayed the same for him. So after this, her finding out this, life's kind of went on for him and stayed the same, but not for her. Her whole world was ripped apart. Now her question. He said that he has, quote, never liked this need that he has had for the pornography. And that I could never understand it because he's a man. So he's like, I've never liked this, and you couldn't understand because you're not a man. And then she says, if this, quote, need is in every man, is there ever a point with any woman where she can ever expect her partner to be 100% faithful, spiritually, mentally, and physically? If my husband, as she says, is an upstanding, moral, and loving individual, could betray me in this way and then chalk it up as, quote, simply the essence of being a man, then that doesn't leave me with much. She says, if in fact any hope that I will ever be worth his fidelity or the fidelity of anyone, I would truly rather be on my own than deal with this incessant and intrusive thought that he will be forever seeking sexual gratification outside of our union. Your words and wisdom would be truly appreciated. And she says, sincerely, one jaded, exhausted, heartbroken wife. Oof.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and as tragic as this is, we know that this submission is emblematic of what many who listen to this podcast in some form or fashion feel.
Absolutely, without.
I wish this was a unique situation, but it's not. And she is, again, kids are involved, right? They've been married a year, so it does present some difficulty.
Month.
A month.
Yeah.
So it presents some difficulties. So we really, on the back of all that, and her putting in that effort and trying to do it differently, and do it something different with this new relationship to be in this place, we really do just feel tremendous empathy for her, and are grateful she reached out, and hope that today's some thoughts that we have to share will be a good starting point, if nothing else, for her and for him, if he's willing to listen. So,
yeah.
So there are a couple of things I think that are going on here. Now, we're going to come at this from a different perspective than some may be thinking at this point, because we have lots of other podcasts that place a real emphasis on 2 points that I just want to glance past really quick. The first is that we do not ascribe to this idea that men have a need to look at pornography in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
We believe that is completely a choice, that there is no unavoidable compulsion there, that we are all responsible with what we do with the various facets of our bodies, including our genitals. And that is up to me 100%, how I treat, manage, or don't manage that. Okay. One way or the other.
And frankly, it's become a very big part of a culture that absconds responsibility for those aspects of being a man.
Sure.
Says, well, man's a man, boys will be boys.
That's not the case at all.
Any way. No,
No, absolutely not. The other element that we aren't going to touch on here today, because we've done many other podcasts on it, is she touches on it in her opening statement, that there is a huge difference between lust versus attraction. And again, we're not going to get into that whole dynamic today. There are many other forums. Feel free to do a search on PBSE.com, or PBSEpodcast.com. There's a little search that you can do under the blog there if you're interested more about that topic. We've done at least one, if not several, podcasts on that
several
topic.
Yeah, just put in the search word attraction or put in the search word lust.
Yep. So you can find out more about that. Where we wanted to come at this from today is that is a couple of other points. And we wanted to, I guess, speak to the partner a little bit here first, because the first thing, if we're going to tackle a situation like this, because we can only imagine what this partner is going through, right? And she has these questions, right? Like, what do I do now? Right? Here I am. This is the situation it is. Here's where he's at, and da 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 da. And so we want to point out this idea and this concept that we teach in D2C often: authentic and accurate. And the authenticity behind it is what justifies the accuracy. See, the authentic and therefore accurate decision-making in my own personal world is always going to be reliant on a couple of things, right? But one of those principal ones is the first step is I need to be able to examine my own thinking and check for potential thinking errors, whether they are trauma-based or otherwise, right? And the trauma-based piece especially applies to this situation, as you can only imagine this woman is definitely enduring some severe complex trauma, right? Where we have a pattern of repetition. Here she is, right? Did this whole song and dance with guy number one, made all these different changes, got out of that relationship, was very careful in operating into this new one. And we can only imagine, I mean, her brain, I'm sure there's a piece of her that, just to put it mildly, is just saying, holy shit, here I am. History is repeating itself.
Yes.
All over again.
Right. And you can only imagine with that, what we call complex trauma layered on top of trauma, as Steve's saying, it's so, and we know, oh man, even as we say this, we know how hard it is for her to be able to have enough mindfulness to step back and ask herself, how much is my complex trauma influencing what I'm thinking and doing today?
Yes.
It's so hard to do that, but so crucial, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Well, and we will, and so let's just take one example, right? So, and there are lots of potential things that could be going on for this partner, right? But let's just look at one. Might there be some black and white thinking going on for this partner? Possibly, right? Not just with regard to how she's seeing him, but also with how, and we're inferring this next piece a little bit, but how she's seeing herself.
Yeah.
Right? Black and white thinking, for those who don't know, right, is where we tend to see things without a shade of gray. Right? It's either all true or it's not true. All these things are existent or none of them are, right? That's kind of the lens that we're referring to with that particular thinking error. Partners like this woman who come into Mark and I's office or find themselves in our Dare to Connect program very commonly vocalize almost all exactly the same thing, right? How could I be so stupid?
No.
How could I do this again? How could I let this happen? What is wrong with me? What is broken within me that is causing this to happen? In other words, there's that lens that many partners struggle with of, this is a problem with me.
Yeah.
Like I am just, for whatever reason, a magnet to these people, and I just keep perpetuating this over and over again.
Right. And she even expresses the kind of the ultimate pain of the ultimate pain outcome of that. I'm just destined or better off to just be alone for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can totally.
I now have 2 relationships that have done this. That logically means that, well, maybe everyone is like this, and therefore logically, maybe I'm just not capable of picking good people, so I should just be out.
Or maybe there are no good people.
Yeah, or there are no good people, or both, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there are no good people, therefore I shouldn't be in the relationship game, right?
Yeah, you can see how you could easily get to this space after what she's been through.
Absolutely. So just speaking to her for just a minute, it sounds very much like you, as well as other spouses listening, very much did your homework to the best of your ability, right? You took your time. This was a 3-year relationship before you got married. It's not like this was short, right? You were seeing each other at least monthly during that time, right? You did many things that you were doing to try to set the stage for the success of the relationship. But despite that, now at this point, now just a short time into a marriage, new information is coming to light. Whether it's because you didn't ask certain questions or because he was just being deceptive, and maybe it was a combination of both. Maybe it was all on him. Who knows? Who's to say, right? But new information is coming to light as you move along in the relationship. And it sounds like, so in other words, can you do your due diligence and still have things like this happen? Yes.
Absolutely.
Those can both be true.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Now on the flip side of that, right, Mark, talk about the flip side. Let's talk about this gentleman here, because with this can also be true about the husband, right?
Yeah, because we need to look at this. I want to speak to this for a minute from the standpoint of his side of the street. Mm-hmm. Let's just say, I wish he would have. I don't know what he considered when he first was in a relationship with this woman. 3 years, did not her history come up? Question mark. Right? Was he aware at all about her trauma history and the terrible, horrible things she had been through? I hope so. I almost want to assume that. And if he had some knowledge of that, and this is speaking to all of the guys out there, whether we have a partner that we're in a relationship who has a past trauma, or whether we are the cause of that past trauma, there needs to be a mindset going into that. I'm in a relationship with someone who has trauma, a trauma history. Am I going to take the time to understand what that means? Am I going to learn the skills that one would need to acquire in order to be in a healthy relationship with a person like that? How much am I owning on my side of the street to enter into this relationship where my partner has a trauma history? My own or before me, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And what is my part in that whole process? It sounds like there wasn't much of that, or maybe he didn't know that he had a part in that, or right. How do you become on your side of the street a healthy, skilled, patient, empathetic, loving person to realistically face the fact that I'm in a relationship with someone who has a trauma history? That is not to be taken lightly.
For sure.
Right.
Well, and combining with that, right? Because I absolutely agree with everything that Mark is saying. And the partner in this submission, she talks about, we again didn't have time to go into all the details, but she talks about how despite this huge issue, right, for her, he in many ways is a really good guy,
She does. She
right?
does that openly.
He's good with the kids, and in other areas he is empathetic. He provides, like these, like lots of things are happening that are really positive. But again, this black and white thinking piece, right? It also sounds like he does struggle with some very serious behaviors as well as thinking errors of his own.
Absolutely.
And complicating that is that they happen to be in an area where the partner here carries huge amounts of past trauma.
Yes.
Right? And both of those can be true. Mark and I would like to think, I don't know, we don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but we'd like to think that before we got into recovery, there were many good positive qualities that we both had in our relationships, and we would go off our spouses. They're far better judges than we were at that time, but they've talked about that many times, and in many respects that's why they stayed with us and put up with our nonsense in other areas as long as they did, was because they saw that potential, right? But that does, so in many ways we were good partners and people, but at the same time, when it came to relationships, not just our intimate one with our partner, but other relationships in general, we were just really broken.
Absolutely.
And really struggled. And
Yeah.
both of those can be true.
Yeah. And so his side of the street with regard to his relationship with her and all that we just talked about, but what about his aspect now on his side of the street of how he's going to now face this aspect of himself? Is it just to say, well, that's the essence of man. There's really not much I can do about that. You're just going to have to accept that as part of the package of me. Or is he really going to take this serious and say, you know what? I have an issue. I have struggles. I have a problem. And am I going to lean in now and take response hyphen ability, account hyphen ability, right? The ability to respond, to account for myself. And am I going to get serious about my own recovery? Am I going to get serious about facing the fact of what it means to have an addiction? Or am I just going to try to sidestep all of this and just rationalize, justify, or minimize it?
Yeah.
This is a big decision on his part in this relationship now, that her complex trauma has just been blasted to pieces by his behavior. Now, what does he do with regard to him? Not just to her and them, but to him. It's a big deal.
Well, and alongside that, and what I'm going to say next, I think I'm just passionate about, because I wish, and maybe people did tell me this, and maybe I just wasn't ready to hear it till later on in, or it got beat into me eventually or whatever. But here's a secret for every addict that is out there listening. Because I could have, instead of reinventing the wheel, this would have been so helpful. I wish that I had not gotten on the stumbling block of, well, what she's saying doesn't make sense to me. Therefore, I'm questioning its validity. What she's saying doesn't make sense to me. Therefore, I'm allowing that to determine the level of validity that I look at it through it. In other words, I was gauging, as a defense mechanism, my capacity or willingness to empathize with her based on how much that reconciled with my own understanding of the facts. And what I eventually realized, again, somebody told me, or God slapped me over the head. I don't know how it happened, but eventually I got to that point of recognizing, you know what? Let's just say that let's just say that Brittany is just crazy. Let's say that this is all just in her head, right? Now it's not, let's just say for sake of argument, it were that she was vocalizing, Steve, you're hurting me. And this, at the end of the day, do the facts around that matter? They do, but not as a first step. The first step, before I can even begin to examine that, is recognizing that this woman that I love, that I married, that I signed up for a lifetime with, is what? She's dying.
Yep.
She's in pain. She is emotionally bleeding out.
Yep.
Whether or not it is accurate has very little to do with the initial approach, which is that whatever it is, she is in pain, and I have to meet her in that and figure out what to do with that in an authentic way. And there is a time and a place to be able to then begin to reconcile the facts at some point.
And what's one of the ways we help addicts to get into this place where they do what we call shame resiliency work and not have it be all about them is allowing themselves, intentionally moving themselves into the role that's already natural to them. I get the impression it's natural to this guy to protect, to come to the aid of, to come and stand by the side of this person that I love and adore and cherish. She's in crisis. Yes. And I'm not going to sit here and argue about the reason why she's in that crisis. She's in crisis.
Yeah.
And I'm coming to her aid. Even if that crisis is largely because of me, it doesn't matter. I'm putting on my come to her aid hat, my protect her, cherish her, most important person in the world. I've got her and I'm at her side right now.
Mark brings up a great point, because even as I'm just sitting here, I'm thinking about all those popular wedding vows that all of us, everybody's wedding looked a little different. But if you look at the things we typically commit to in a partnership, right? To love, to cherish, to all these different things, nowhere in there did the officiator say, and you're going to do all these things as long as it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
There was no clause about that. Right.
Unless you feel like it's not entirely your fault.
Exactly.
If you feel like it's not your fault, then you're off the hook.
That was never a clause.
No, never.
Right. And so anyway, that's just, I like I said, that was probably 10 hard therapy sessions to get to that realization. So hopefully someone else listening here doesn't have to go through that same thing that Steve did and Mark did.
Well, if we move now to her side.
Yes.
Right. The first thing that Steve, as you and I prepared for this, we're like, we just want so much to reach out to this woman and just invite her, give the safest environment possible for her to move into self-compassion, self-compassion, self-kindness, self-patience, because that's getting beat up at this point. You can just feel it in her submission. Right. Because she did all the right things. She really did. And so we would just invite her to just come to the place of self-compassion and self-love. Wow. Even though where she's at in the outcome is just horrific, right? Did she reside in her own integrity and in her, as best she could, her own authenticity and her own wisdom? I really get the feeling she did. All along the way. And is she recognizing that, which I know is hard?
Well, and that this applies to me. It applies to Steve's brain. So here's the caveat, because I'm going to out myself as a closet Trekkie once again. Captain Picard from The Next Generation has a really famous quote that obviously the writers of the show made, but it's true. It is possible to commit no mistakes and to still lose. That is not weakness. That is life.
I love that. It's possible. Yeah, say that again.
Yeah, it is possible to commit no mistakes and to still lose. Or in other words, for the poor outcome to happen, right?
Yeah.
That is not a weakness. That is life. And it's true. Whoever said it, whether it was the executive producer of the show or whoever actually said it first, there is a lot of truth there, because that is when part of self-compassion is allowing for the human factor.
Yes.
It's recognizing that we can do our very best, and either because of actions or inactions on the part of another, because of a lack of awareness on our part, we can still do everything right to the best of our abilities, and things can still turn out less than stellar.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes it isn't a question of I screwed up or a deficit in me. Sometimes it is simply this is another person's agency coming into play and brushing up against my world.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why at the beginning of this we invited this partner to try to become as aware as she can about what she's feeling currently and the decisions she's trying to figure out to make, how trauma informed all of that is. And that is in no way to say that what she's feeling isn't legitimate, that what she's been through isn't horrific, but looking at where she is now, can she come from a place where she can start to examine her authentic wants and needs and capacities, right? Where is she? What does she authentically want and need for herself in this relationship? What does that look like? Not just from a trauma-informed place, which is important, but from a more holistic place. What does she authentically want and need? And what authentically are her capacities today? Does she have the capacity to try to see if she wants to go through this guy as he gets into recovery and goes through all that work? Can she even do so? Right? That authentic self is so crucial.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In other words, it's that empowerment piece.
Yes.
Right?
Where is her empowerment?
Well, and for those who are in our Dare to Connect program, they've heard us mentioning this more and more, and they're going to hear a lot more of it here in the future. And one of the big tenets that we talk about in Dare to Connect, our program for addict spouses and couples, is this idea and this concept of self-empowerment. And that operates under a couple of mantras. Mantra 1, there is always a choice. Now, that doesn't always mean that the choices are ideal, nor does it mean that they are choices that are comfortable, but there is always a choice. I may be a victim to another person's actions and the consequences of that, but I am always both enabled, empowered, and therefore accountable for my response to those things.
And we know, oh man, do we know that this message is so hard to hear by betrayed partners. We do. And when we say there's always a choice, and we use the word we can always be responsible and accountable. Again, please hyphenate those words. Response able. I am going to retain my personal power, my sovereignty as an intelligent, valuable human being to keep intact my ability to respond to this situation in a way that is authentic to me. I am able to respond. I am going to retain in all of this, in the horrific nature of it, my ability to account for me, what I want, what is authentic for me, what is safe for me, what is my next right thing in all of this process. I refuse to let go of that.
Yeah.
Right. You can tell we spent a whole weekend, Steve and I, trying to get to the core center of how to help our D2C people get into this place. It's so hard in the presence of trauma, isn't it, Steve? So hard because you're
more so than we have. It is. Well, and that brings up another important point, and we hope that every partner can hear this for how we intend it. Self-compassion and accountability can coexist. We are aware of, and we know that there are entities and groups out there that oftentimes will front. And we know that we live even in a popular culture now where over time there has been this shift, just even in recent years, where we are shifting. There's a cultural attempt to shift more of the responsibility of how I think and how I feel onto other people or other things, providing that for me, right? Creating a quote unquote safe space for me to be who I am, as opposed to taking accountability for my choices. In other words, you need to make these choices so that I can then be myself and make choices. In other words, my ability to make my own is dependent on you. And we would lovingly submit that whether that's on the world stage, whether that's here in your own recovery, that is a myth. It's a really pernicious myth, to be honest with you. I can absolutely be victimized by somebody, and I absolutely can and should seek justice where possible. Again, emphasis on where possible, pursue accountability where possible, but always through the lens of recognizing that I am the only one that can change my situation.
Yeah.
Right? In the context of this trauma business, for example, you've heard us say 1,000 times on this podcast, trauma is a one-way street. There is no way to be untraumatized by the traumatizer, even when they would like to do that, even when they want to. And God knows Mark and I have been that guy in our marriages. Like, we wish we could go invent the time machine and take it all back.
One of the ways we've expressed it over the years, we quote, punched our spouses in so many ways.
Yeah.
Actually, physically, spiritually, fidelity wise. I wish I could go back and unpunch my wife.
Absolutely.
I can't. What I can do is I can take responsibility and accountability for my own recovery. I call it relentlessly pursue her, in the sense of doing all I can to create the environment, the ideal environment where she can feel and be safe. But at the end of the day, she will tell you, if she was here right now, she would say, I appreciate and love that Mark is trying to do all those things. At the end of the day, I do me and he does him. I am responsible and accountable for my choices, my life, my happiness, my joy. And if he stops trying to create that safe environment, I will hold my boundaries to protect my own authentic self in life. And if he insists on continuing to provide an unsafe environment, I may choose for the relationship to be non-compatible, and I will move on. But she will tell you, but it is always up to me.
Well, and it does. It comes back to that piece, right? Again, self-compassion and compassion on that can and has to coexist with accountability. And I think, again, the cultural misnomer there is that somehow, in some way, in certain circles, the message has been, and I think is still being sent, that compassion therefore diminishes accountability on the part of the person for change, right? On shifting my circumstances, my environment. That is not only something that is my option, it is my responsibility. I am the only one that can determine if the trauma that I experience becomes an informant or a dictator.
That's such a great perspective.
I'm the only one that can decide that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Is it going to be an informed voice that recommends caution, that says we should do something different, that recommends a change of boundaries? Do I allow it to show up in that council within my head as one voice among many, among courage, among action, among fear, among all the other voices operating in concert? Or do I allow it to come in with a bomb vest strapped to it and say, I'm running the show?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Because and when it runs the show, what do I give up? I give up my sovereignty. I give up the ability for me to choose my next right thing.
Absolutely.
And our wives are like this. A lot of partners we work with who are down the road of their healing, they will tell you, I am no longer, nor will I ever again give up my ability to respond, my responsibility or my accountability. I'm never going to give those away again to anyone else's control. I will keep those on my side.
Yep.
Right? It's such an important shift of thinking. It's refusing to leave the place of empowerment ever again.
I am responsible for my own action or inaction, right, in any given situation. Anyway, we could say more about that, as you can tell. We're just mildly passionate about that topic.
We are.
But we hope that this has been helpful. We hope this has been informative. If you appreciate this approach to recovery, which we recognize in some circles would be regarded as unique, if you appreciate the boldness mixed with empathy that we do our human best to bring to the table, if you appreciate and like both what we would like to think is wisdom from two addicts in long-term recovery with the capacity to resonate with the insanity of being in addiction, as we have been, and being on the brink of our marriages ending, as we also have been, then you will love the Dare to Connect program. We would love to have you come join us. There's a 2-week free trial you can grab for that at daretoconnectnow.com. That is ongoing. We continue to just roll out more and more features on that. Please give the website a check. We need to go in and update it because we've added 2 or 3 things since, and we've got 2 or 3 more in the hopper that are going to be added to it. But it's an ever-growing wealth of growing online, live, and recorded content to support you and your partner in this fight for intimacy and connection. Life is too short, and therapy sometimes can be too expensive to try to do it alone. Hit us up. Go to daretoconnectnow.com and come give it a join. We'd love to have you with us.
Yeah. And again, if you have questions for this PBSE podcast, send them through to pbsepodcast.com. We will tell you we're a couple of months behind.
We are.
So if you will come and join us at DDC for the free 2-week trial, you could get questions you have answered. Wednesday is our partner session. You could get them answered in the partner session on Wednesday if you come on over.
Absolutely.
So, hope you will.
Okay.
All right,
awesome,
everybody.
guys. Have a great rest of your week, and keep fighting the good fight, and we'll catch you in the next podcast.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.